Good evening. I'm glad to be back with you tonight, and I'm really excited about our topic for tonight. This is my favorite part. So if you came back, good for you. And I hope this will be very helpful to you. Of course, this weekend we are examining the natural world. And we're trying to examine the natural world as we do anything else that we find in this world. For example, maybe a watch. If we see evidence of organizational complexity in a watch we happen to find out in the middle of the woods, we know from experience and observation that this only occurs as a result of human-like intelligence that acts upon matter. In a way, by the way, that temporarily disrupts the second law of thermodynamics. Do you know the second law of thermodynamics? That entropy or disorder is always increasing, which, by the way, could be another topic of discussion of how evolution goes against the second law of thermodynamics, because organisms are gradually increasing in order, which goes against everything else that we have observed. But that's not our topic tonight, so we're not going to talk about that. Tonight is a continuation of our discussion last night about the auditory system in the human body. We discussed concepts of frequency and amplitude in a sound wave, and we discussed mechanisms of the ear that are responsible for translating those sound waves into electrical signals for the brain. Now, you probably remember if you were here last night, I couldn't show any videos. Nothing worked. But I think tonight it's going to work. And so the video that we didn't finish. Oh, do I have? Okay. I hope this does not continue like it did last night. All right, so we're going to watch this video. We are going to watch this video. Okay, now it's not showing. Is this on extended view, maybe? All right, you know what? We'll have to forget the video. So let's review a little bit. So we talked about the eardrum, which picks up the sound waves from outside and then translates it to the middle, the ear bones in the middle, which then push against the cochlea. And inside the cochlea, we talked about there's fluid and there's a membrane in there that has all these hairs, 30,000 hairs, bundles of those things that are attached to nerves. And we talked about how that translates the sound. All those hairs get pushed around based on the frequencies that are coming in. So we're going to expand on that idea tonight. And my goal for tonight, I want your head to explode and your brain to fall out. Okay? So if you start to feel something like that happen, it's good. It's intentional. Because we're going to talk about how sound in the real world, the complexity of the sound in the real world. So, and if you did you find it?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so this is the video. Okay, this is a little summary, kind of catch us up.
They pick up sound waves and change them into information that the brain can interpret, such as music or speech. Sound is a pressure wave that can vibrate either quickly or slowly. Slow vibrations produce deep sounds, while quick vibrations produce high-pitched sounds. Sound enters the ear and is directed through the ear canal, where it first reaches the eardrum. As the eardrum begins to vibrate, it sets the ossicular chain in motion. The ossicular chain consists of the hammer, anvil, and the stirrup. Sound vibrations move along the ossicular chain and into the inner ear. Within the inner ear, the cochlea plays a central role. It is here that the mechanical energy of sound is converted into complex electrical signals, which are then passed on to the brain. In simplified terms, the cochlea is a spiral-shaped tube filled with fluid. Sensory cells, also called hair cells, line the entire length of the cochlea. These hair cells have varying degrees of sensitivity for the detection of different tones or frequencies. This allows the ear to perceive the entire spectrum of sound. The change from mechanical vibration to electrical pulse is a complex process resulting from the movement of hair cells in the cochlea. Along the entire length of the cochlea, the hair cells are arranged like the keys of a piano. Hair cells located at the base or lower region of the cochlea are responsible for high frequency, while hair cells at the apex are responsible for the low frequencies. As the fluid in the cochlea is set in motion, it causes a corresponding movement of the fine structures on the surface of the hair cells to take place. These movements cause tension differences, which produce electrical signals that are passed along the hearing nerve to the brain. The auditory cortex of the brain interprets this information as sound, for example, as music or speech. The entire chain of events, including the various steps that convert sound waves from the environment into information that the brain can interpret, happens so fast that individuals can hear sound both continuously and instantaneously.
That's all we're going to watch because it talks about hearing loss. This is actually from a website that they do cochlear implants, this company. So they have a little video, but I thought it was very well done to see everything moving. And as he says, it happens so fast that you can hear things both instantaneously and continuously. Because not only do you have to process what you're hearing now, but it has to be connected to the next thing. Like, if you don't process that right away, then you can't hear the next thing. So for us to hear continuous sound as a whole, the amazing speed of that is really just, it's unbelievable. So that gets us a review of the actual mechanisms that are in the ear. Now, one thing to just point out about this, that's kind of a interesting idea. You've probably heard the question, if a tree falls in the forest and no one's around, does it make a sound? And the answer to that is no, not really. It changes the air pressure, but if no one's actually there to hear it, then there's no sound. Sound is in your head. Pitch is in your head. Because I was going to see tonight, we're hearing a lot of stuff, and our brain does a lot of stuff with it. The perception of pitch is entirely in our brains. It doesn't exist out in the world. The frequencies are there, but the perception of pitch and music that we have is entirely in our heads. So just keep that in mind as we go along here. Now, tonight we're going to talk about a little more complicated stuff, but I think it's going to be able, not in the terms of it'll be hard to understand, but just understand the complexity of what's going on. So the first thing, and we've been seeing these pictures from before, is we need to understand a basic concept here. The difference between pure tones and complex tones. That difference tonight is going to be important, okay? So pure tones right here is picture in your mind a simple wave like this. That's not bumpy at all. It's a very simple one. That's a concept of a pure tone, which means it has no harmonics. Now, what are harmonics? We're going to explain that in a minute, okay? So it means it has no harmonics. It's very simple. This kind of sound doesn't really exist in isolation in the real world. The closest thing to a pure tone in the world is a tuning fork. Okay, that gets pretty close. So if we want to make a pure tone, we actually are going to use a computer to do it. It can generate a pure tone with no harmonics. But generally in the world, you don't hear a tone doesn't exist like that all by itself. Okay, so then the difference between that and a complex tone. Okay, so this complex tone, you see, it has a lot more squiggles and bumps. It's because there's harmonics in the sound. And we're going to talk about what that means, but I just want to get across that there's these two different concepts first. But you can see, even with all the squiggles and stuff, do you still see a pattern? Yeah, so this is repeating. And remember our vocabulary term for repeating? It's a periodic vibration. Okay, so both of these are periodic vibrations, but this one's complex and the other one isn't. Okay? Now that we know that, I can tell you the best part that I've been waiting for this whole time. And one of the things about talking about the ears is you have to build up enough information to even talk about this part. And this is from the physics world. In the 19th century, a mathematician and physicist by the name of Jean-Baptiste Fourier, can you guess where he's from? He deduced a theorem that reverberated throughout the physics world, including the study of acoustics. He discovered that any periodic vibration, okay, anything like this, is actually a combination of pure tones. Okay? So if you have a sound wave, that's a complex one, right? All the squiggles and bumps. That is actually the same as this. Okay? This is the same as this. You can break this down into multiple pure tone frequencies. So what are we looking at here? Here's this big red one, right? That's one. Here's a blue one. Here's a green one. So all of those are different frequencies. So what he discovered is this periodic vibration can be broken down into all of these different frequencies, which tells you that when you hear, and a complex tone is basically a real sound. So if a clarinet plays a note, a single note, that's a complex tone. Or if you sing a note, that's a complex tone. Are you with me? It's a complex tone. And what Fourier said is that complex tone, we can analyze it by breaking it down into many pure tones. Okay? And then there's a special relationship. Not only can we break it down, but all these frequencies that we can break it down into have a special relationship to each other. Okay? So let me show you about that. Okay, so a periodic vibration is composed of multiple pure tone frequencies called harmonics. Oh, and this is what harmonics are. I'm glad I had that slide. All the frequencies of that complex tone are called harmonics. Okay? Now, some of you might recognize the term overtones. How many of you have heard of overtones? Okay? Overtones and harmonics are pretty much, they're kind of synonymous. Overtones is a little bit of a broader category than harmonics. And overtones also, the way the frequencies are counted is a little bit different. It's like, come on guys, do we have to have multiple terms that make it more confusing? So we're just going to use harmonics, okay, to be consistent all the way through. But if you're thinking overtones, that's basically correct, okay? And these frequencies that we follow based on Fourier's analysis, these frequencies follow a specific pattern, which is called the harmonic series. Okay, and let's talk about what the harmonic series is. So if this is a complex tone, again, this is an instrument playing one note, okay, one tone, a complex tone. But inside this tone, there's multiple things. There's this one, the first harmonic, there's this one, there's this one, there's this one, there's this one. Do you see a pattern in those? Anybody, what is it? Okay, so you can see that they're all 200 hertz apart. The way physicists describe it in terms of like a series is the second harmonic is 2 times the first one, right? The third harmonic is 3 times the first one. The fourth harmonic is 4 times the first one. Okay, you get it? And of course, I only have 5 up here, but there's more. There's more. So the frequencies in a harmonic series are integer multiples of the first harmonic. And the first harmonic has a special name because it's the first. So it's called the fundamental. Okay, so the first harmonic is the fundamental. And then all of the rest of the frequencies in the harmonic series are integer multiples of that frequency. Okay? Now just that by itself, a periodic vibration is so regular that it can be split up into this, and the relationships between those frequencies are always the same all the time. You got it? So that's physics, okay? That's the acoustics of it. Now, why does that happen? That might be your next question. Why does that happen? And there's actually a physical reason for that. To explain it, we're going to use the concept of I had these 5 times the fundamental. Okay, so that's just reiterating what I already said. Why does this happen? Because, take for example a fixed string. So I said we're going to use strings a lot because it's easy to see. A fixed string like a piano string is fixed between 2 points, or a violin string is fixed between 2 points. All right, so if you pluck that string, all right, the vibrations start to go up and down that string. So it's actually vibrations going back and forth. Because when they get to the end, what happens to a wave when it hits something? It reflects back off and goes the other direction. So if you get waves, going, if you get a wave going along a string, it reflects back off. And of course, the wave, if the vibration is going on, so it comes back and overlaps with itself, right? And when that happens, there's interference. And they start to create what's called a standing wave. all right, that looks like it's just going up and down. It looks like the string is just going up and down, but it's not. There's waves going this way and that way. But the way they're interacting with each other looks like you just have waves going up and down. It's called a standing wave. Now, this is the biggest standing wave you can have on that string, right? The picture here is like snapshots of the string in different places. Does that make sense? Like it's going up and down. But this string can vibrate in more than one way. That's one way it can vibrate, but it can also vibrate this way. The way that waves interact with each other, they can also create this vibration on the string. Now what's interesting is when you have a string that's fixed between 2 points, there's not an infinite number of ways it can vibrate. It can only vibrate in certain ways. Because the endpoints can't move, right? They can't go up and down. So they're fixed, they have to stay. So the way the waves work in the middle, they only have so many choices. And what we find is they can only vibrate in these ways where the distance is equal. All the waves are equidistant from each other. All right, so it basically divides the length up into equal parts. But a string can vibrate in all these ways. And so you can see, do you see the same pattern? You see a pattern here? If this is the fundamental, then this is 2 times that, it's twice as fast. This is 3 times that, it's 3 times as fast. So when you pluck a string on a guitar or violin, it's not only vibrating in one way. It can actually vibrate in many of these ways all at the same time. And so it actually creates a whole array of frequencies when you play the violin or play a guitar or sing or whatever, not just one. They're like, wait a minute. Like, when I play a note on the violin, I hear one pitch. I don't hear 10, I hear 1. I know. We're going to talk about why that is. But the reality is it's a complex tone that has multiple harmonics in it. Okay, so what do you think our brain does with these? So in order to demonstrate what our brain does with this, I'm going to do a demo. Okay? I think this will be fun. I hope. All right, can we see this? Everything's really big. I'll deal with it. I'll deal with it. Poor Sam, leave me alone. He said, all right, so what I have done in here, this is Audacity. If you want to play around with this at home, you can download Audacity for free. And it's a digital audio software where you can record yourself, but it also allows you to actually generate tones. So what I've done here is I've generated a bunch of pure tones, okay? My fundamental in this case, I don't know if you can see, well, you probably can because it's very big. My fundamental is 220, all right? So that's my fundamental frequency is 220. Now, if you want to hear that, you can hear what a pure tone sounds like. Can you hear that? Can you tell that that's missing something? It sounds very dull, right? Well, that's because there are no harmonics in that sound. That is pure 220 and nothing else. And see, that you're already starting to see now, that's not how that's not how things sound in real life. It's never that simple. Okay, let's hear it one more time. Okay, so that's 220 by itself. All right, so then what have I done? I've put other pure tones in there that are according to the harmonic series. So times 2 is what? 440. 220 times 3, 660. Times 4 is 880. Times 5 is 1100. Times 6 is 1320. Times 7 is 1540. So I have 7 harmonics in here. And of course, there would be more in a sound, but usually those first 6 are the most crucial. So I'm going to start adding these, and I want you to listen to the sound. First of all, can you sing this pitch? Now, some of you men are actually singing an octave lower, because it's this pitch right here. It's not this one. It's this one. So basses, you don't have to sing if you want. It's all right. This one right here. Okay, that's the pitch. Okay. Now, when I add 440, what do you think is going to happen? Let's see what happens. All right, so let me go back to the beginning. Not solo. Okay, hang on. I messed it up. That's actually what 440 is by itself. That's not what I meant to do, though. Okay, let's try again. Here's 220. Here's 220. Here's Oh, I made a little loop on accident somehow. 220. Wait for it. 440. Now it's interesting because I don't know what may happen between. Okay, then I'm going to add 660. What's an 880? I hear somebody closing your ears. What is that? Can you still sing the pitch? Is that a different pitch than we sang a minute ago? That's the same pitch. How many frequencies do we have so far? Like 4? Now, what is this 880 by itself? Is that the same pitch? No, it's actually higher. Okay, are you catching this so far? Now, if I add all of them in, what pitch is that? Is that the same pitch? That's the same pitch. What? I'd have 7 different frequencies going on here. Now, what's this last one sound like? What does this one sound like? That doesn't sound anywhere like that other pitch, right? If I play that by itself. But when I put all of it together, okay? So your brain is, we're going to talk about why this is happening. Isn't that weird? I have all these different frequencies, but I'm experiencing that as a single pitch sensation. Now, here's the weird part. Okay, get ready for this. I'm going to play this again, and I'm going to take out one. What pitch is it? Same pitch, right? Same pitch. What did I just do, though? Did you notice? I removed the 220 frequency. And that's the pitch that we're hearing. But we still heard it. Did you catch that? I took out the frequency that we're singing, and we still heard it. Now, I'm going to play this again, and I'm going to take out something else. Same pitch. I'm going to take out some more. Same pitch. Same pitch. I'm taking them out. Let's see how we do with this one. Same pitch, it's getting a little funky though, right? How is it that I'm hearing 220 when I've taken out 220, I've taken out 440, I've taken out 6, I've taken out all these frequencies, and I still hear 220? Okay? Are you getting this? You're getting this. Is this weird? Did you know this already? Okay. So now, before we talk about what's going on here, what is the point? So you might be asking, so why are all these harmonics? If I hear the same pitch anyway, why do I need all these harmonics in here? Okay, well, there's a good reason. So I'm going to do something here with I'm going to pull up this, move this over. Pull up my mixer. Okay, here's all the frequencies. That's a little big. Everything is a little big. Okay, so this is a good way to see them all too. All right, so you can see also I played with this some. You notice that the 7th harmonic down here is a little bit quieter than the others because that's what happens in real life. Usually once you get past 6, 7, 8, those higher ones are lower in energy and the amplitude is lower. If they weren't, the sound gets very metallic. So, but now I'm going to try to, here we're going to play a little game. I'm going to try to create an instrument sound. It's not going to be realistic, but see if you can guess what instrument I'm trying to get you to recognize. Okay? Clarinet. Does that sound like a clarinet? Now, why does it sound like a clarinet now? What did I do? I took out some frequencies, right? I took some out. Well, that's because a clarinet, the frequencies that they produce favor the odd harmonics as opposed to the even ones. So I took the even one out. I took out the second one, and the fourth one, and the sixth one. So all we had left was 1, 3, 5, 7, and that sounds like a clarinet. So the harmonics, we organize that into a pitch and a timbre. Do you know that word? T-I-M-B-R-E, timbre. It means the tone color of the sound or the quality of the sound. So that's what all those harmonics are for. It gives the depth to the sound, the richness to the sound, and the identification of that sound. And that's why a clarinet sounds different than a trumpet, that sounds different than a piano, even though they all might be playing the same pitch, right? But they sound like different instruments. It's because of the harmonic series and the varying intensities of the harmonics. Are you with me so far? All right, let's go back, and I want to show you. So, okay, let me start this again. So we have all these, am I going backwards? Where am I? Oh, there's my demo. Okay, so if, for example, this would be one instrument, you have all these frequencies and the intensities are different. Okay, so that's an instrument. And this would be a different instrument. This would be more like a clarinet because it favors the odd ones. 1, 3, 5. Okay, so the intensities of those harmonics are different. Same note, different instrument. This one is a different instrument, same note. This one favors the even ones, 2nd, 4, 6, which is what a flute does. Flute sounds favor more of the even harmonics, okay? But when I tried to do that on this, it didn't work very well. The clarinet worked best, so I stuck with that one. Same note, different instrument. Now, how do we do that? How are we doing that? So let's go back to the ear for a minute. How do our brains translate all these frequencies into a single pitch sensation? Okay? So we remember what the sound waves are coming in, they're hitting the eardrum, they're going in the cochlea. So, and we go to the basilar membrane, right? And remember that the basilar membrane, the frequencies, the basilar membrane is tighter at this end and looser at this end. And so when the waves come in, the parts of the basilar membrane that have that particular frequency vibrate the most at that spot, okay? So the sound that I just did was 220, right? 220, 440, 660, 880. So I put these little dots on here as a rough estimate. This is not to scale or anything, okay? Just show. So when those waves of the sound that I just played, when that sound goes into my ear, this part of the basilar membrane is going to vibrate. Those cells are going to get activated. That's 220. 440 will be right here. Those are going to get activated. 660, 880, 1100, 1320. Okay, all those spots are going to get activated and be like, I'm getting pushed around here, and I'm going to send that signal to the brain. Okay? Now, does the basilar membrane know to group those all together? No, the basilar membrane doesn't do that. The eardrum certainly doesn't do that. The eardrum gets the composite complex tone wave and just sends it on. The basilar membrane splits it all out, but it doesn't know what to do with it. This goes to the brain, and the brain processes this into a pattern or a sensation. Now, the answer to how do we do this, the real answer is we don't know. You came all the way here just no, neuroscientists don't really know how the brain does this. But they've made up a name for a mechanism. They call it the central pitch processor. But they don't know where in the brain that is, because the electrical signals go to multiple parts of the brain to be processed. And so they don't really know where this happens. But they know it's happening because we experience it. So we have the central pitch processor. So what the brain is doing, though, if you look at this, this is what it has to be doing. We don't know how, but it has to be doing this. It's looking at these frequencies, and it sees the pattern of the harmonic series and puts it together. And we know it's really doing that because if I take out the fundamental frequency, I still hear the fundamental frequency. Which means that if you have some of the harmonics of the fundamental, your brain will put that together and say, oh, I recognize that pattern. those two frequencies together must be with this fundamental, and so you hear it. Now, where did you learn to do that? Babies can do that. You come out of the womb being able to do that. Research on babies, they will turn their head towards melodies that they recognize. They've done research on babies. Babies recognize melodies. So you come out of the womb already pre-wired, understanding your brain knows how to interpret the harmonic series from all these frequencies. And even if you don't have them all, even if you have two frequencies, and you can try this at home, two frequencies that fall in the harmonic series, your brain will extrapolate the fundamental out of those. And we just demonstrated that. I started taking them out, and you still hear the pitch. The quality of the sound changed, but you still heard the pitch. Now, which that begs some new questions. What about, so how does your brain deal with this, with real life then? So let's say you have a flute, let's say you have a trumpet and a clarinet playing the same pitch. I have that written down. If we had a piano, a trumpet, and a violin, and a clarinet, let's say 4 instruments, are all playing the same pitch, and let's say it's 220. They're all fingering, let's pretend that note is A. Okay, they're all playing an A. So the pianist is playing an A, the clarinet is doing their fingering for an A, the flute, okay, they're all playing an A, the same one. How is it that we hear their individual timbres while they're playing at the same time? Because they can all be playing the same pitch, but we can pick out, piano, clarinet, I hear violin. They're all playing the same pitch. And why is that weird? Why is that crazy? Because they're all playing, what are the frequencies that they're producing? 220, 440, 660, 880, 11. They're all producing the same frequencies. So how do we distinguish, when they all start hitting the basal membrane, how do we actually distinguish them into separate instruments? Do you see what I'm saying? Because the frequencies are all the same. So how do we parse that out? Well, guess what? We don't really know. No, but there are some things that we do when we're hearing different instruments. There are some timing cues. And this brings up another point. We've been talking about the fact that on the vascular membrane, I'm going to go back to where's my picture? Wait, this takes forever. Okay, my picture, yeah. Okay, I'm talking about how this picks up frequencies. I lost my point. What was I saying? How do we distinguish? So there's, this is the spatial element, okay? Because I'm just getting pushed around on this spot of the basal membrane, I know it's a 220 hertz, which by itself is amazing. But then there's another part that we're attending to, our brain is attending to, which is timing cues. When are things happening? And what I didn't say before is your brain is attending, first of all, it's getting this, it's splitting, the basal membrane is splitting it all out. Your brain is interpreting this as timbre, the tone quality of something, and because it's also attending on this larger level, is how you get the single pitch. It also helps you determine timing of things, rhythm. Your brain has to be listening and paying attention to different levels of what's going on at the same time. You follow what I'm saying? Okay. My notes in place here. So last page. When I start talking, I forget where I am. So back to timing cues. How do we distinguish the different instruments? There's timing cues. For example, when instruments start playing, it's called the attack. Well, one of the ways we identify instruments is because of the attack. If you think about a piano, what's the attack on the piano? A hammer hits the string, right? That's rather abrupt. So the large intensity right away, and there's a gradual decay. So the attack of the piano is very particular. If you think about a violin, the violin's attack, not really. There's more of a gradual increase in the intensity right away because of the motion of the instrument. Okay, so all of these instruments have an attack. And so neuroscientists believe that's one way we identify if they're all playing at the same time. Our ears are attentive to that attack. And even if you're all the best players in the world, you all start at the same time, at least you think you do. On the millisecond level, you didn't all start at the same time. And guess what? Your ear notices that. That kind of timing level on the millisecond level is picked up. Because you can't really start at exactly the same millisecond. It doesn't really happen. So those timing cues of when things actually begin help us determine that as well. And then, of course, in a real piece of music, instruments are playing different lines, there's different rhythmic things that happen, anything sudden changes that happen, we attend to that. So we, believe that if we have these timing cues, that helps distinguish when everybody is playing the same frequency all at once. But how about if we had the same instrument, for example, a piano, playing different consonant pitches on the same instrument? So let's look like this. How about this? How do we deal with this? So here's an A, and here's the fundamental will be 110. Here's the harmonics that will come after that. Here's the C sharp. Here's a 140. It's a 140 and all the harmonics that come after that. Now, your vascular membrane receives these signals. And remember, they're all just next to each other. These would be right next to each other. These would be kind of right next to each other. These are right next to each other. How does your brain parse those out into two different experiences? How does it even know to do that? Why doesn't it sound like a big giant mess of all of that stuff? That's just a big mess of frequencies. But your brain says, oh no, this group goes with this pitch, and they will experience that one, and this group goes with this pitch. We don't know. We don't know, but it's doing it. So if I play on my phone piano, these two pitches, I want you to hear them. That's what these two pitches are. Well, actually, they're lower. These guys are lower in this picture. Is there any doubt in your mind that you're hearing two separate pitches? No. But you're getting this mess of frequencies. Your brain is the only thing making sense out of it. And it's making sense out of it based on the harmonic series that no one ever taught you, which is pre-wired. Now, I want to kind of put this together in a little demo, not demo, but try to put all this together in a real life experience, okay? It's like singing hymns in 4-part harmony, right? As we often do. What is your brain actually processing when you do that? Let's take one simple chord, okay? Can we sing this chord real quick? It's not long. Bass is long, tenor is long. Chord sound normal to you? Yes, we sing it all the time. That's a major chord all the time. But what is your brain actually doing? Now that we have a little information, what are you actually hearing when we do that? Well, let's take one at a time. Okay, here's the bass of the C. That's a 130 hertz pitch right there. But of course, we know that this is a complex tone, which is comprised of a lot of other frequencies, right? In a certain pattern, it's a harmonic series. So the second one is 260. We're actually hearing that frequency. I put it in gray. It's shaded on the staff, because we don't know we're hearing that one, right? So we're also hearing 390, 720, 650s, 8780. We're hearing all these and some more, okay? You didn't know that though, did you? When the basses are singing, assuming that they're singing in pitch, or on the Now let's go to so we're perceiving that one as the pitch, even though all this is happening, we're perceiving this as the sound of an instrument. Because the men have a certain timbre to their voice, and it's because of the intensities of all these other frequencies. All right, now the tenors are singing this G here, which is 195. So the other harmonics of this are 390, 585, 780, 975, 170, and I stop there. But you can keep going. Perceived as the pitch, all of that, the rest of that we're hearing as timbre. And see, timbre is what gives you the richness. We heard the pure tone a minute ago. Would you want to hear that all the time? No, thank goodness. where we get to hear all the harmonics, because that's where the real richness of the sound comes from. All right? Let's go with the alto. They've got, it's 325, it's 650, 975, 1300, and I stop there because they're in a room. That's perceived as the pitch, and then of course everything else. Are you following this pattern so far? And then here's the soprano to C. You got all these, and then I stop because I ran out of room. You just extrapolate it from there. Now, put all those together, we have all of these things going on. So we're not hearing 4 frequencies. We're hearing, well, at least 24, but more, right? More than that, all at once. So what is our brain doing? We're getting 24 frequencies, and our brain actually gives us 4 that we hear? That is crazy. Now, this also explains, harmonics also helps explain why something sounds good to us. Right? Aren't there sounds that sound pleasing, consonant sounds? Okay, let me get a little higher. Right? Those sound very nice to us, and especially the octave. That sounds the best. But harmonics help you understand why that happens. Because any sounds, when you play 2 notes at the same time, if the more harmonics that they have that are the same, sound more pleasing to us. If their harmonics are the same. That kind of makes sense, doesn't it? So if the harmonics overlap. So in this scenario, how many of these overlap? I kind of see if you can see these. You see them? Okay, so like there's the harmonic frequency over here, which is the same as the fundamental over here. And then this G exists as a harmonic here in both of those. This B is in both of these, the G and these. Okay? Now, if you had, I don't have it up here, if you had 2 notes that were an octave apart, like if you had a clarinet playing a C, and then another clarinet playing a C higher than that, or a flute, or whatever it is. 2 Cs that were an octave apart. The higher note, all of its frequencies also exist in the lower note. There's nothing that's different. All of these higher ones exist in the first one because it's an octave apart. And so that's why the octave sounds the most consonant to us. Okay? The next one is the 5th, and this is a 5th right here. These 2 notes form a 5th. You can see there's a good bit of overlap between their overtones, but there's one here that doesn't. Right? It's D. And D and C, if I played a D and C on the piano together, can you hear that? Okay, that is more dissonant. Let me turn it up. Okay? Those are closer together, and they don't, so there's a little bit of dissonance happening between those 2 tones, because the harmonics aren't all the same. So there's a little bit of extra noise that happens in between those. Now, when we hear a 5th, that still sounds very consonant to us, but it's not as consonant as this. Right? That's the most consonant. And what's interesting, if you look at music history, of course, all cultures have always had music. That started from the very beginning of time. All cultures have all had it. And if you look at the music of cultures, it's cross-cultural that people think the octave is the most consonant, and then the 5th, and the next one will be the 4th. And that appears in their scales, it appears in their music, because it's hardwired into us to appreciate the harmonic series power. Okay? Now, what's interesting is my time is up, and we haven't really gotten to music yet. Not really. Because we talk about music, is to talk about melody and harmony and rhythm, right? But those concepts are exponentially more complicated versions of what we're talking about now. And I wanted to lay the groundwork to see what we're actually doing. Because if you think about, imagine yourself now singing in 4-part harmony in the middle of New York City. Just imagine it. And then imagine you're in the middle of New York City, you know all the noises that happen in New York City. Imagine there's a string quartet across the street that's playing Mozart. And then imagine there's a loud marching band 1 street over that's playing lots of loud music. So all that's going on, then you hear, of course, the cars passing by, and the trucks, and the car horns, and maybe a baby crying, and people talking over here, and people walking along the sidewalk, clicking their heels, and bird sounds, and who knows where those sounds are going. But while you're singing and when you're listening or stopping, you can actually place all of those different sounds where they are in relation to you, you think about all the frequencies that are coming to your ear at the same time. What a mess! Now, how did you ever figure out how to parse all that out? But we do it without even thinking from the time we're a baby. Do you get that? Now, all of the elements of music, melody, harmony, rhythm, require spatial and temporal processing by the brain on multiple levels. And I hope we got that. Now, to close tonight, I want to think about this. Oh, that graphic did not work at all. Translation from PC and Mac. Now, here's a good quote. I forgot how to good in one way. The new evidence gained at the cellular level of hearing reveals the cochlea as an evolutionary triumph of miniaturization, the most complex mechanical apparatus in the human body, with over 1 million essential moving parts, an acoustic amplifier, and frequency analyzer compacted into the volume of a child's marble. Now, I agree with everything in that quote, except evolutionary triumph. What does triumph even mean in the context of evolution? Triumph over what? There's no purpose to it in the first place. But it is a mechanical apparatus, and it's this big in your ear. The vascular membrane is only 1.25 inches long with all those hairs on it, and it's a frequency analyzer. Now, when we look at the world around us, I think our intelligence tells us that we could never create things as complicated as what we find in nature. Largely because we don't even understand how it all works, or why it works that way. Is it any wonder, then, that humans have always believed in a God, or gods, throughout history? Humans have always recognized that however this world came to be, the power behind it is awesome, and way beyond us, because it all runs so regularly without our consent or help. In those terms, atheism really isn't the belief in no God. It has simply replaced the concept of a personal being with the concept of natural selection, an impersonal force selecting variations for the improvement of living organisms. And I don't know if you've noticed this, but when you watch nature shows, I hear respect in the narrator's voice when they're talking about nature, don't you? And there should be. I mean, whatever force brought all this into existence deserves some respect and some reverence. And it's humbling for all of us. We're all amazed by the power behind the universe. The difference, the only difference, is to whom or what do we give the credit. The signs of intelligence are all around us and in us. The existence of an intelligent designer has many implications, and it's our job to follow the clues and seek it out. Thank you for your good attention tonight. We're going to take a 5-minute break to take the questions together. Okay, so I've got a good bit tonight. And, I'll just, I won't make disclaimers up front. I'll just do that. All right, so this first one I'm going to just go ahead and get it out of the way because somebody asked last night, what does this mean for the Laurel versus Yanny thing? And it's lucky that I even know what that is because I'm not somebody that goes around searching stuff on Facebook or YouTube. But there was a girl at work that had it on her phone, and she ran over and she's like, "What are you doing? What are you doing?" And I was like, "Yanny." But then she played it again, and I think it was, I don't know if it was the same Facebook post or if it was a different one, and I heard Laurel. So I was like, "Oh, whatever, that's a stupid thing." So I haven't even researched it. I don't know anything about it. I can tell you in language, I mean, you're producing, when we're speaking on a pitch. There is pitch to our voice. When we sing, we just sustain it. But there is pitch to our voice, so we're creating harmonics. But language is more complicated in a way because we have other sounds that are not periodic vibrations. The periodic ones are the musical ones. But sounds in between, like and those are not periodic vibrations. That's what we would call noise, right? That creates an array of frequencies, but they don't follow the harmonic series. It's just a whole bunch of them together. But again, our ear says, "Oh, that's not the harmonic series. That's noise." However our brain does that. And we mix those in between the vowel sounds. So also when we're singing or when we're making these sounds, the different vowel shapes of our mouth change the intensities of the harmonics. Dan said he has an oscilloscope. You can sing into it and actually see the harmonics that you're creating. And if you change your vowel sounds, the harmonics will be different. Because your head, your neck and your head are resonators, and I didn't even talk about resonance. Because all instruments have resonators on them that help enhance certain harmonics, which gives them their peculiar sound. So it may be that, I don't know what's coming out of the phone. We have to know more about what's coming out there, who produced that, where it came from. So I don't really know how to distinguish the difference. And I heard both of them. So I don't know if I'm ambidextrous, whatever that, I don't know what that means. So unfortunately, sorry, I can't answer any more than that. Is the fact that men and women are able to reach notes the other cannot point toward a divine design? And why? I think all of it points to divine design. The men don't go as high because their vocal folds are larger. And so men actually, though, have a wider range than women do. Because we can sing low notes very high, and then we can go into our falsetto. All right? And if you're the Bee Gees, it's cool. But some of you are looking at me right now like, you're weird, man. But if I was wearing a cool suit with a microphone with crazy hair, I'd be cool. So men have actually a very wide range because they have longer vocal folds, and women's are shorter. So that means the baseline frequency that they can make is faster than men's. Simple as that. And talking about men and women, I think just thinking about that in general, the different genders, I think is a very interesting point. It's a very interesting point in evolution, I think, as well. When did genders come about? What was the first improvement that was made? Where natural selection said, hey, that should be female. We need some females. Let's take that improvement and go with it. I think that's a difficult question for them to answer. Would our eyes work the same way? Light travels in different wavelengths and that causes the perception of color. Would a combination of these frequencies create what we see? I don't know a whole ton about the eye, but yes, there is it's similar in terms of you're receiving lots of information and your brain puts it together. In the book I was reading about, and I meant to get a bibliography out. I'll try to do that before the end of the weekend. The book that I was reading was talking about how even in visual, if you look at a word, and of course without a visual this doesn't go very well, but even if you have, you've probably seen visual illusions or something, but if you just put shadows ever so correctly, you can make it look like it's a word, right? But all the lines of those letters are not there, right? Your eye fills in all the gaps. So in that sense, like we do in frequencies, we have a pattern and then we fill in the rest. We definitely do that visually as well. So yes, it definitely equates that way. Does everyone have perfect pitch? No. And that's because perfect pitch is not the ability to hear. Perfect pitch is the ability to hear something and match it up with our piano, basically. Our musical notation, our musical scale. Because if you think about a piano, you have lots of notes on the piano. Those are not all the possible frequencies that are out there. There's about 6% difference in the frequencies on a piano. Part of that, again, is physical. Because on the basilar membrane, remember how we talked about how it's divided up? About every 3.5 to 4 meters is an octave. And how does the basilar membrane ever figure out to organize itself that way? As you get higher up, that means that there's more frequencies in the same amount of space as you get higher. And so those are all really close together. And so we don't have as much frequency discrimination in the higher frequencies as we do in the lower frequencies because they're vibrating the basilar membrane closer together. And so when we're hearing two tones at the same time, frequencies and the amount varies depending on how low or how high it is. Frequencies have to be far enough apart for you to hear them as different. Because if they're vibrating kind of in the same place, we hear it as kind of the same thing. And I was thinking about that, I was like, well, that's interesting. That's interesting. But then I thought, well, that's actually kind of helpful. Because you think about singing in a church situation, Now, we know that what matters is the heart, but is everyone singing in tune in church all the time? No, but we're kind of close, right? A lot of people are close, and so we perceive it all as basically the same sound. And so even if you're a little bit off, your ear doesn't bother your ear so much because you're kind of vibrating right around the same place. But perfect pitch is when you can hear a frequency or you can hear the complex tone and say, oh, that's an A on the piano right here. And that's a kind of a special ability that I don't know that we understand completely, and some people you're just kind of born with it. But you don't know that you have perfect pitch until you learn something about music and the pitches that we use in music. And then you can say, oh, wait, I just happen to know what that is. Okay, so it requires some extra knowledge about music to even know if you have what we define as perfect pitch. Does that make sense? Okay. All right, my first question, how much of the brain's ability to recognize a different instrument or sounds is training or experience? That's a good question. From what I was reading, the implication of the research that we have is that it's more natural to recognize, well, let me back up. To recognize pitch is something that's hardwired into us. We can recognize pitch because babies can recognize melody. Another interesting thing about that, and this actually, maybe I'll come back to that because there's another question that relates to it, so try to take that thought. In terms of recognizing different instruments, that's definitely training. And again, another amazing thing about the brain. You can hear a clarinet play, and of course you're getting a complex tone. And if the harmonics have a certain pattern of intensities to them, well, then you store that knowledge, right? So that when you hear a sound on the radio later, you can say, oh, that's a clarinet. Because I went to my storage place in my brain and I pulled out that frequencies analysis that I had already done, and the sound that I'm hearing now matches that one, clarinet. Which again, you think about how much information we're storing in our brain to be able to match up with other things that we hear. But that requires a parent or somebody saying, Johnny, you hear that? That's a clarinet. So you have to point out what those are. He's hearing it, but he's not labeling it. So the labeling takes some training, for sure. And scientists, from what I was reading, we're not positive. They said either you learn really fast, right, when you come out, to recognize pitches, or it's just already in there. But with what we've seen with the harmonic series, how do you learn that? You can't learn that consciously at all. It has to be wired somehow. All right, can you talk about why music from Eastern cultures sounds dissonant to Western ears? And I assume vice versa. That's a good question. First of all, what's interesting about all the cultures of the world, I shouldn't say all the cultures of the world, but if you compare Western to Eastern and some of the scales that come out of different cultures, there's a lot of similarity. In fact, if you look at it, really all the scales, generally all of our scales from across the world, about 5 to 7 notes. 5 to 7 notes that generally refer back to the harmonic series. Those first 6 notes in the harmonic series are generally found in our scales. And so even though Western or Eastern music might sound dissonant to me, there's actually still some basic fundamental similarity between those. Now, what sounds dissonant to me is a broad idea and rather subjective. Some people might not just like certain sounds of certain instruments. Some Eastern instruments, you might just hate the sound of that instrument, period. And you're not used to it. So we have a universal ability to hear the pitches and the sound, but then there's a cultural training that goes on as you grow up, and these are familiar sounds that you hear in your culture. You get used to those, and those are things that you like. And so then when you hear something that's very foreign to that, that's not something that you like, and that's definitely a cultural. But however, if you listen to that music a lot, you might start to change your feelings about it. Often our familiarity with it is a lot of the indicator of whether or not we like it or not. I found that in my class, because a lot of people are not familiar with classical music. And so you start playing that for them, and like, well, I listen to country. Like, okay. So you try to play some of the music, and they're not familiar with it. And part of that, too, with classical music, is because it's from long ago, there's a shared understanding that we have with people in music when we're performing. If I'm going to perform a pop song, you have certain expectations of what I'm going to be doing. You may not think that explicitly, but you do. You expect me to have a basic structure, right? You expect me to sing a verse, and then the chorus, and then probably sing another verse, then the chorus again, then a bridge, right? Then the chorus again, then maybe the chorus again, and maybe again, right? So you expect that. For the classical music, that was not how the music was structured. And so it's easy for us to get lost because we don't have a sense of expectation of what's supposed to come next. We don't have a relationship with it. I found that a lot in class. Which goes again, we didn't even talk about this, when you hear a melody, think about the amount of information you're processing in the melody. Right? Every single one of those pitches that you hear is a complex tone for a certain amount of time, followed by another complex tone for a certain amount of time, followed by another complex tone for a certain amount of time. So you're memorizing the complex tones, the amount of time that all those tones are happening, and then you're also memorizing on a macro level. Because in melodies, we don't do a string of information, we do phrases within a melody. For example, amazing grace, how sweet the sound, is the first phrase of that song, right? That's like a little, like there's a comma in that, right? That's the first idea. And then, that's the next part of that. So, but you see, that's another level now that we're talking about, because we're analyzing the frequencies, we're dealing with the next level of just organizing those into single pitches, then we're attuning to the sequence of events that happens to that, then we're memorizing the whole phrase that was, and following. Do you see how much we're doing? And we don't think about that at all. We just do it. But then when you get all those patterns in a culture, those are all things you're used to hearing and you have stored in your memory and you can recall. Those things are familiar. Okay. How does one respond to an atheist who is insistent on the fact that microevolution proves macroevolution? This is probably one for Dad, because he's done a lot more debating with evolutionists than I have. This is a newer sport for me. And, you know, there's a point with people, I think, where if you can't find some common ground, if you can't find some common logic that you can agree on, I don't know where you go from there. If they can't agree that going from that microevolution is not inherently a proof for macroevolution, we have observed here's the huge, huge difference. We have observed microevolution over and over and over and over and over. We have tried to hit the wall with microevolution, we've tried to break through microevolution in the laboratory. We can't break through it. We've hit it over and over and over. And so why should I, as a human being, then be convinced that a lizard can turn into a bird? Why should I be convinced of that? I think that's the approach you need to take. Make them convince you. Usually they're attacking, and so we feel like we have to go on the defensive and come up with all these facts. The burden of proof is really on them. They're the one coming up with this theory, not you. So make them convince you that you should believe in evolution. Tell me why I should believe it. Convince me. Give me your best arguments. Lay it on me. If I'm wrong, I want to know. So I think that's the way to come at it. Don't make them just ask you all the questions. There's some good questions for them. So that's what I would say. So if sound is in our head, what are we recording when we save music? That's a great question, because the whole recording thing is a whole nother topic. So just real quick, are you guys okay? I'm talking. You can always leave if you need to go. And recording, what's very interesting is recording really imitates what's happening in the ear. Before, I don't even know how much we knew about the ear when we were doing it. I think we knew a good bit. But in a microphone, in the inside of the microphone, what's in there? Some of you know. There's a little membrane inside the microphone that's working like your eardrum. You're singing into it, your vibrations hit that, it vibrates. Now what's underneath that, there's like a magnet and coil. Depends, there's different designs of how they do this. But the magnet and coil, your eardrum is creating different pressures or whatever. Some of you engineers correct me. But it's a transducer, which means it converts energy from one form to another. So it takes it from being air pressure into electrical signals. those electrical signals go through the wire. And if you're just going to a speaker, it goes into your speaker. Sometimes there's a little amplifier before it. It takes the signal and boosts it, gives it more energy. And then it sends it to the speaker. And what does the speaker do? Have you ever watched a speaker? Right? What's it doing? It's pushing the air. Just like a string would when you pluck it. It disturbs the air. The speaker is pushing the air in the same pattern as what you were seeing. Now, because it's using the complex, remember the complex tone versus the individual frequencies? That complex tone has a pattern to it, right? Do you remember the picture? It was like up and it was down a little bit and then up a little bit and down and up a little bit, okay, something like that. So that means there's a big compression first, then there's a little bit of I lower the pressure some, then there's a little bit of a bump of a pressure, then I lower the pressure, then there's a little bit of a bump of a pressure, I lower the pressure. Okay, so that's why a speaker can recreate those complex sounds by pushing against the air and just recreating what we produce. Now, when you record it, that's what the computer is saving. But once it goes into a computer, it has to go through a process where the computer takes rapid pictures of it. Okay, so the sound goes in there, and the computer's going picture, 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 picture. And of course, through math, they figured out what's the rate of pictures that you need in order to recreate a sound effectively. And basically, what the computer's doing is takes the sound, the sound wave, and it's like connecting dot to dot. It creates dots all along that sound wave. Dot, 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 dot. Those are all the pictures. And if you have enough dots, you play connect dots. If there's enough dots, you get a pretty good recreation of what it is that you're doing. So the more pictures you take, the more dots you have, and the closer that is to the real thing. But of course, there's always some stuff lost, right? There's some information lost in that process because we can't possibly take pictures fast enough to get every instant of sound. We have to take an infinite number of pictures, right, to get all the moments of sound. But we take enough, and when our ear fills in any gaps, it's good enough for us. So that's what's recorded. And then the computer, when it plays it, translates that back into an electrical signal, which goes to the speaker, which pushes against the sound, which then goes to your ear, and does the same thing it always does. So I said all that because it's an amazing thing that we've discovered that we can do that. But it also, I think of it with intelligent design, it's finding the ear, to me, is like going out in the forest and finding an entire recording studio. Oh, look what nature just produced. That's what it is. That's definitely equivalent. Do animals hear pitches the same way we do? I did a little bit of research on that. I don't claim to be an expert. And there hasn't been a ton of research on that, actually. That's been more interesting to people lately. But they did some experiments with songbirds because they're looking for animals that have complex auditory systems, and songbirds do. They do complex sounds, and they hear those sounds of their mates and stuff. So what they did was they were trying to figure out if birds have relative pitch perception. And what that means is, if I sing the melody, Mary had a little lamb, but then I go, Mary had a little lamb, did you hear that those are the same melody? Were those the same melody both times? What was different? I didn't go an octave, I didn't go high, but I went higher, right? I went higher for the second one. But it was the same melody, but it was in higher or lower. So they were trying to figure out if animals can do that. Because that's actually pretty complex. Because you have to remember the sequence of events of those melodies and see, that's about the relationships of those frequencies to each other that I can then translate to different frequencies that have the same relationships. You get that? That's complicated. But of course, we do it as babies. And they've tried it with babies. Babies can recognize the same melody at different pitch levels. We come out and we able to do that. So they say, can birds do that? So they train the birds to hear a certain ascending line of pitches. And when they heard the ascending line of pitches, they were supposed to pet something. And then with the descending line of pitches, they were supposed to not pet something. Okay? So they spent however long it takes to train a bird to do this. But they actually trained the birds to successfully do that. When they heard an ascending pitch, sending line 4 melodic notes, they would peck. And so they got them down. So then but they were the same ones. It was always the same two that they were playing for them. And the same frequencies. So then they went back to these birds and they said, okay, let's play the same sequence higher and see if the birds will do it. What do you think happened? They did not. They couldn't do it. They did not peck. They did not recognize that when I took this sequence and moved it up, that it was the same thing. So the birds did not do it. They've done some research with monkeys, of course, because those are supposed to be our close cousins, to see if monkeys respond to music at all. So they had an experiment with 2 cages that were long, and there were speakers at the end of them, and they dropped the monkey in the middle. The monkeys had to decide. They would play a pitch on one, or maybe it was like a Mozart melody on a light instrument, and then on the other one it was silence. And they were trying to see what the monkeys would do. Guess what the monkeys did? They were silent. They did not prefer to go over to that melody point. They did another experiment where it was like chimps, I think, in their a zoo area for them, and they had a speaker that was playing like tribal drum music. Okay, and they wanted to see if these chimps, and the chimps did seem to be curious. They would kind of go a little bit closer to the speaker, but there wasn't really anything super conclusive that came out of that study. But so far, as far as we know right now, the ability, at least for relative pitch perception, is unique for human beings, which that's a huge component of enjoying music. Because music is always changing and modulating to different places. And there's no evidence that any animals enjoy music the way we do, and that's a whole nother discussion. Why does music even affect us the way that it does? I mean, you can hear a piece of music and instantly be brought to tears that has no words in it. It doesn't need any words or language. It is the sequence of tones itself, and the combination with the rhythm of that and the harmony of it seems to touch us in a very deep place, often that we can't even express in language. And how does it do that? Nobody knows. There's books and books and books and books and books that have been written about that. And of course, neuroscientists are trying to find the place in the brain, or the combination of places in the brain, that create that emotional experience. The amygdala in the middle, if you know parts of the brain, but we don't really know. But that's definitely uniquely human experience. And we create music. Animals don't appreciate it, and they're certainly not going to create it. We create it. The other thing I was going to say about that, from an evolutionary standpoint, that's actually an important question for evolutionists, because Darwin said in his book, if there were developments in evolution that are purely for our enjoyment and that's it, that destroys my theory. Why? Natural selection is not about your enjoyment. It's not about you. Natural selection is what's going to help you survive and reproduce to continue your species. And music has no survival value in terms of, it doesn't. It's purely for our own pleasure and enjoyment. Now, you might have a philosophical argument about why music is very important, and I do too, but it's not going to put food on your table, especially if you're a musician or work for a living. But it's not going to feed you, and it's not going to save you from predators with music. Now, what Darwin said, though, Darwin's explanation of music was that it was part of the early mating ritual. Because sometimes, with birds, they're singing to their mate and that attracts the mate to them. So he theorized that early humans, like Neanderthals, were doing some kind of musical thing to attract their mate. And so that helped them reproduce. But is there any evidence for that? Now, it's interesting, I was watching a video of an evolutionist talking about that, and he said, now here's a clip of what it might have sounded like. I was like, are you kidding me? Just postulate your theory and go on. Come on. And it was something like, I was like, you have got to be kidding. Anyway, does that answer the question? All right, I'm going to answer this one fast. I probably need to get out of here before I start to break down. Okay, humans' ability to create a new combination of sounds. Yeah, because we understand how this works, I basically created a sound as part of my demo. Did you think about that? That sounded like a clarinet, but it wasn't a clarinet. Right? So in this technological age, with all of our synthesized sounds, well, that's how we do it. You can, because of Fourier's theorem analysis, you can combine all kinds of different frequencies and make an entirely new sound that never existed before, which is where all your pop music sounds come from, right? The electrical, the 70s, right? The 1970s, like, hey, we can make a new sound. Let's use it in everything. But that's how we do that, by that Fourier synthesis of sound. So now we can actually create things that didn't exist before because we've unlocked a small part of what I believe is God's design. And if you take this into a spiritual context, what is something that God tells us to do in worship? To Him. Singing. You know, people have different theories about that. And God doesn't tell us why He did that. But don't you see some divine wisdom in telling us to do that? With all the things that we've learned, music is simply there it provides pleasure for us. It provides inspiration for us, however it does that. And there are meanings transmitted through music. And this is a little more of a philosophical argument. But there are meanings transmitted. Well, it's not just. You can research. You can test it on people. There's meanings transmitted through music that cannot be translated through language. And so I believe that God put that there for us so that we could communally experience the same emotion at the same time for all these things. Plus, I did an experiment one time at church. Because sometimes there are hymns with the same words, but different music. Have you ever tried those? And so we actually sang two of those back to back. And I just asked the audience, I said, what did you feel during the first one? And then, what did you feel during the second one? And we had very different answers of what we felt like was being conveyed by the music to enhance the meaning of the words between each of those songs. It was not the same. And it's not just, I don't believe it's just so that we're all saying the same words at the same time. Obviously, words are important. We don't want to be singing about something silly. We're going to sing about God. The words are important. But if you just wanted us to be saying words at the same time, we could all get the same version of the Bible and we could chant something together. We could just say it together. If that was the only point of it. So I don't think that's the only point of it at all. There's a whole nother layer of meaning experience that comes out of music. And so, again, that's something we all do in worship. And it's one thing we all do together in worship. It's not just one person talking. We do it all together. And it's mentioned that it's going to be in heaven, too. Now, will it be the same? I don't know. All earthly things done away. Will we have harmonics in heaven? I don't think it really matters. Because it's going to be beyond what we can imagine. But I think it gives us some indication of what God thinks about music. He obviously has some interest in it. And you think about it from the perspective of the Creator and designing beauty. He wants us to get a notion of how He is like, what He is like. And if you look at music, I think that can help us appreciate that came from God. If you like music, remember, that came from God. So, all right, well, that is all the questions, and it's 9 o'clock. So you guys have been really patient, and I appreciate your very good attention. And I hope the point of all of this is to stimulate your thinking, to stimulate you to seek God. And one of the points I like to say all the time, God is everything you hoped He would be. He is everything you hoped He would be. And if you look at the creation and the amazing design of it and the things that we can enjoy from it, go towards that. Go towards that and find out who he is.
All right, I'm done. Thank you.